Welcome to my virtual diner. Pull up a seat at the counter, get comfortable. Most shows talk about the people, I talk to them. This is Real America with me, Bridget Phetasy. All right, welcome back. Some quick-ish housekeeping. If you want to be called on, you need to be on Zoom on camera, and you need to virtually raise your hand by clicking the reactions button. If you aren't on Zoom and want to be part of our virtual live audience right now or in the future, click the link in the description below to get the Zoom link below, or go to tway.tv/BridgetZoom. The Zoom link is the same every time. Put it in your calendar, save this link. We will use it for every single show. The voice of God you're hearing is Cousin Maggie. Many of you already know her.
Hello, everyone.
She's actually my cousin. That would be weird if I called her Cousin Maggie and she wasn't. And co-producer, we make a lot of stuff together, like Dumpster Fire, Walk-ins Welcome, and all the other content you can find at Phetasy.com. Maggie will be monitoring the chat. If you have something to say and you raise your hand, Maggie will message you privately to find out what you'd like to talk about, and she's going to help make sure we stay on topic. So don't be offended if she cuts you off and tells you we need to move on. We can't guarantee we'll get to everyone, but we will do our best. And everyone knows my number one rule is don't be a dick, so please don't act like Elon having a meltdown on X in one of his moments. All right, we're going to get into it. We're talking about divorce, guys. A lot of people, Gen X, I'm looking at you, were quite triggered last week when mom and dad, Elon and Trump, broke up. But all jokes aside, it got me thinking about divorce again. I was 12 years old when my parents split up, and my husband was 10 when his parents got divorced. And about a year ago, I wrote a piece for Spectator called Divorce Never Ends, talking about the long-term effects of divorce. And it went viral. It was crazy. Needless to say, folks had a lot of feelings about it. It trended for 2 days on X, and I received emails and direct messages and even phone calls about it. I heard heartbreaking stories from grown adults who said the piece put them right back to being a kid in a world torn apart. And I heard from women and men, often defensive, about their reasons for ending their marriage, feeling that I was somehow judging them and not realizing that they were judging themselves. I heard from other adults telling me to quit whining, grow up, and get over it. But here's the thing. You never get over it. The two people involved don't get over it, even as they move on with their lives and marry other people. And neither do the kids. That's not to say that people aren't resilient and they won't move on, but acting like it wasn't the single most impactful event in my young life isn't helpful either. As I write this monologue, and I'm going to try and not get emotional because my rule is never ugly cry on the internet, the news just broke that Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys has died. A true genius. His music has been with me my whole life. And weirdly, see, I'm getting emotional. The Beach Boys, in particular, brings me back to exactly the moment before my parents split up. This is the power of music. I was about 11, and my little sister and I would play with our California Barbies, our Beach Boys' greatest hit cassette tape on repeat. I didn't know it then, but it was the end of my innocence and the end of my family as I knew it. But the weird thing about divorce and our culture, the breaking up of a family has been so normalized in our culture that the pain from such a rupture is minimized, and the decision to get divorced can be taken too lightly. It alters the trajectory of everyone in the family. It's a fork in the road, a breaking apart of something sacred. As I made clear in the piece, getting out of an abusive, toxic relationship is different than ending a marriage because you're over it or bored or don't want to do the hard work to stay together. And rightfully, there is a lot of debate about this. After my piece, I heard from adults who argued their parents would have been better off divorced. I heard over and over again, more is caught than taught, meaning that if kids are observing a loveless marriage, it's worse for them than if their parents split up and found true happiness and love. I can't say I entirely disagree either. That's the paradox of being a product of divorce. At a certain point, you don't remember your parents being together, and in fact, you can't imagine them ever getting a degree. Children in two-parent homes are less likely to experience behavioral issues, get in trouble with the law, or drop out of school. I am living proof of all of these things. But this subject is complex and deserves thoughtful consideration and compassion. There's so much shame and regret that surrounds people who get divorced, and you can't know what you don't know. Making that decision is different than living that decision. When suddenly you're alone on Christmas at 60 years old, swiping on a dating app, wondering, was it really that bad? Luckily, I've got a professional to help me navigate this topic, Dr. Jeremiah Stokes. In addition to general psychotherapeutic services, he facilitates mental health services related to high conflict divorce, co-parenting dynamics, and child custody disputes. He provides these highly specialized forensic mental health services to help assist parents and children with navigating these complex family issues. As is often the case with something so fraught with emotion, I'm of many minds about divorce, as many people are. So after I talk to Dr. Stokes, I want to hear from you. Are you divorced? How did you manage it? What did you wish you'd known? How would you navigate your divorce differently if you had to do it all over again? Did you push through a time or separation and make it out to the other side? Okay. What did you learn from that experience? Are you a product of divorce? What advice would you give your younger self about coping? I want to hear from you, America. As always, we need your tips and your tricks and your wisdom. But before we get to our first guest, a quick word from our sponsor, Quest. Today, our guest will be talking about mental health, but just as important is your physical health. And there's no better way to keep on top of it than with Quest Health's line of tests. Quest offers over 150 of the same tests trusted by doctors, including diagnostics for specific ailments like STDs, chronic conditions like heart, liver, and kidney disease, as well as testing that is almost never covered by health insurance, like fertility and advanced women's hormone testing. Quest also offers broad packages of tests that go way beyond the standard tests you typically get in an annual medical checkup visit. Concierge medicine and functional medicine doctors charge thousands of dollars for these type of workups. Quest offers them for the price of a night out on the town. Your health and well-being is worth it. Getting in to see your doctor can take months. Instead, in just a few days, you can go from an annual health profile from Quest that includes all the basics plus biometrics like height, weight, and blood pressure. When you finally get to see your doctor, you can show up and share your results with him or her easily. Visit questhealth.com and always use the discount code RealMay25 and get 20% off your purchase. That's questhealth.com, code RealMay25 for 20% off. Not always, just right now, use that discount code. All right, let us get into it. Can we bring our guest on, Dr. Jeremiah Stokes? I'm so excited to talk to him about all of the things divorce related. Welcome to the show, doctor.
Oh, wait.
We're
unmute
unmuting
you.
him.
I just asked you to unmute.
Let's see.
There we go.
There he is.
Okay. All right.
Here.
First of all, Bridget, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I want to tell you a little bit more about my clinical practice. So I've spent several years of my career working in high conflict divorce. And when you work in high conflict divorce, you really work on the full spectrum, meaning you work in premarital dynamics, marital dynamics, the process of separation in and of itself, and then post-divorce. And in that arena, you work with both parents and children. So for many years, I have worked as an expert witness. I've testified on numerous custody-related cases for children. My primary area of passion is reunification therapy. And reunification therapy is essentially a therapeutic model utilized to reconcile a relationship between an estranged parent and child. And there are a lot of ways that that can happen, but oftentimes it's due to the conflict that's present within the co-parenting dynamic. And so I want to be able to, this is the world that I live in, and I want to be able to answer any questions that anyone has, and we can take it from there.
And when you say reunification is it usually with children, or because I know there's an adult estrangement kind of epidemic that I've been reading about of people being estranged from their parents?
Great question. So about 5% of the reunification cases can be related to something outside of high conflict divorce, meaning let's say someone serves a couple tours in the military, and they just haven't seen their kids much in the last few years. That's a reunification type of situation. Or an adoption dynamic may involve reunification. But to answer your question specifically, absolutely, we provide reunification therapy for adult children and their parents. However, I would say overwhelmingly, the majority is minors and their parents.
Okay. And my kind of first question, and this was the big debate that kind of took place when I wrote this piece, and again, as I said in my monologue, I'm of two minds about it. And I realize there's a nuance, there's a lot of ways you can answer this question, but should people stay together for the kids?
There are so many layers.
Outside of abuse.
I think that there are so many layers to that. Each family dynamic, it almost has their own DNA, right? It's all so very subjective. And that question, even though it's important for us to really fully understand what that means, it's difficult to answer without having specific family case scenarios. However, if abuse is present and the abuser is not willing to do the work to remedy that, because at times someone who's being abused, if their partner is willing to get help to mitigate the abusive patterns, they will stay with them. And so we will support that person's decision as long as they're fully educated about the relapse that happens with domestic violence and things of that nature. And so the short end of it is that I think people should do everything in their power to stay together if they have kids. And I think they should do a deep dive analysis of their relational framework, what needs to change, what they need to work on, what they need from their partner. And I think if two people can do that with a trained professional, oftentimes folks are successful.
Do you feel like divorce is something that's just very easy? Is it something that we don't take seriously enough?
It is so easy. It is such an easy process. And it's become, some things I think need to have a little bit of a stigma. I think certain things that have a stigma that are unhealthy, it's good that there's a stigma because it educates the general population that, hey, this is something that we need to be mindful of. And I think what's happened with divorce is it's become completely normalized. And most of us know the statistics on divorce, although the statistics are dropping a little bit, which is great. But it's this idea. Say the question one more time. I'm sorry, the last part of your question.
Just do you think that it's become normalized and
It's
that
become completely normalized?
Too easy, almost. I'm not for a ban on divorce or anything before everybody starts freaking out on me. I just feel like culturally it's become a thing that's very just like skip off and go get that divorce done and not really. This is one of the things that occurred to me in writing this piece and having my own child that never occurred to me is just the long-term lifelong effects of getting divorced.
Absolutely.
On your kids, even your adult kids.
Yes. It is traumatizing. The thing, we in the mental health world, we have what we call big T, like severe trauma, and then we have little t. And divorce is actually a big T in many cases. It's incredibly traumatic for children. It can actually change the entire course of their life. And so before two adults make that decision to pull the plug, they really have to think about the overall well-being of their child for the rest of their life. Because kids of divorce are more likely to have mental health issues in adulthood, more likely to have substance abuse issues. And so I think it has to be, if you're going to get a divorce, it has to be the most thoughtful, mindful decision that you make, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was on a podcast long ago and I was talking about my heroin addiction that I had when I was young. And the host asked me, Bridget, what can we tell people to try and keep their daughters from going down a path like yours? And I said, don't get divorced. Because it was the kind of moment, the fork in the road for me, where I went from a straight A student who was a pretty good kid to completely off the rails. Now, I can take a certain amount of responsibility for choices that I made and then perpetuating a lot of that stuff later in life. But there was a defining moment in my life, and my husband has given me permission to say it's the same thing for him. I don't think we're alone in saying that that's a defining moment for the kids and which way your life suddenly goes.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah.
It does seem like you mentioned that the rates are going down, and I was looking at the rates today, and it says, we're at 42%. Back when I was a kid, it was hovering around 50% for a long time.
Right.
But a lot of that is just because millennials are waiting to get married until later, and they're staying married longer. But then there were some other interesting facts about why that is, and a lot of it is also just young adults are living at home with their parents longer.
Right.
What
Absolutely.
are you seeing in terms of the reasons for this divorce rate going down?
I think there's socioeconomic reasons. I think also what's really interesting is the term called gray divorce. I don't know if you're familiar with gray divorce, but gray divorce references people 50 years and older, and there's a substantial increase in gray divorce, which is really interesting. And so it's like the baby boomers basically are really, there's an uptick on the divorce on their end.
They can't stop getting divorced. Like, what
And
is
they
wrong with
marry
the
more
boomers?
often. And if you marry twice, your chance of divorce goes up 50%. If you marry 3 times, your chance of divorce goes up 70%.
Mm.
But one thing, I wanted to come back to something you mentioned in your situation, and it may behoove the audience for me to provide a little bit of education on the child's experience, if that's okay, during a
Go ahead.
divorce and early. So one thing we have to realize is that our brain actually develops through the relationships that we have with our parents, and not just psychologically, but also neurobiologically. And so when we're very young children, we learn about relationships through the dynamic that we have with each parent, but also their dynamic. And in that process, it actually forms the brain. And that's why kids who are abandoned at very early ages or abused at very early ages will have neurological issues.
Mm-hmm.
So this is deeper in us than just our psychology. This is actually in our DNA, in our bioevolutionary structure. And so we have to really keep that into consideration if we're contemplating divorce, because it could set the entire trajectory of our child's life in a different direction.
This is one of those things too, where I wonder, how do you balance those things as an adult? Why people were saying they made their decisions to leave their marriage. There was no more love. They didn't want to model that for their kid, which I understand, but also, is that just cope? What level of this is, I don't know how you balance those things, because I understand it would be very hard to be in a loveless relationship, or a relationship that just fell apart. And I know my grandparents, it was like, no matter what, no matter how toxic and messed up that relationship was, they stayed together. And then just, I feel like that did kind of inform the boomers a little bit, because they all grew up kind of in the shadow of these quite toxic and crazy dynamics, and they were like, we don't have to live like that. I'm going to go be happy.
Absolutely. And I think in a situation where a person is truly contemplating divorce, I think there's certain questions they need to ask themselves. First and foremost, are they doing their own deep psychological work? Are they going to therapy? Are they learning about their own childhood? Are they doing everything in their power to be healthy people psychologically? That's number one. Because if you're not doing that, then at the end of the day, you can't really trust your own decision making as it comes to your interpersonal relationships. So I think that piece has to be there. I think secondly, are we as a couple, are we doing everything in our power to try to make this work? Are we attending couples therapy? Are we learning about attachment? Are we doing everything are we improving our intimacy? So there's variables in the relationship that have to happen as well. Thirdly, what would be the best for our kids? And I think that parents have to do a deep analysis with their family and the context of their family to determine what is best. And so it looks different in different situations. But what I encourage my patients to do is to do the work personally, to do the work with their spouse, and then to really analyze what would be best for their children socioeconomically, domestically, where they're going to go to school. And then I think that if you are able to say, hey, we're both healthy individuals and we've just fallen out of love, and we're going to be able to give our kids everything that we can, even when we're apart, then maybe divorce is the way to go.
Yeah. I have known some people who came from they were very well adjusted and thriving individuals, and they came from, it seems like, quite self-aware parents who got divorced, but they were really intentional. They were still friends. There wasn't a lot of animosity. They weren't used in custody battles. But there's so much other stuff that comes with getting divorced. If your kid is, it's bad enough if your parents are getting divorced. Now, if you're having to pick a parent in a custody battle or something, it can get very ugly on top of already just losing your family structure. So obviously a lot of it is just the way that it all goes down.
And what you mentioned, there's actually research to support that, strong research to support that. So there is a direct, and it's not rocket science, but there's a direct correlation between the level of dysfunctionality and the separation and post-divorce and children's mental illness. So marriages that end amicably, which probably would indicate two healthier psychological people, right? Typically, kids don't experience as much distress. But referencing the example that you did, if you have a high conflict situation, there's, you're in court battles, you're visiting mental health professionals like me. If those things are happening, then your child is going to have problems. It is absolutely inevitable.
It's so weird because the first time I went to therapy actually was when my parents got divorced, and I was about 12, and it didn't do anything for me because I was kind of numb, first of all. And second of all, they were like, "How are you?" And I was like, "I'm fine." And they kind of pushed me a little bit, but there's only so much you can do with a teen who's obstinately just sitting there refusing to dig deeper. And then I think we did move. So I don't know that they exactly stuck with it, but that was my first experience of therapy, and it kept me. And I've heard this from other people, kids of divorce usually, that was their first experience of therapy, was in the wake of their parents' divorce. It wasn't great or that helpful, and they kind of just told the therapist what they thought they wanted to hear, and then that was it.
There's two reasons for that. One is that a general therapist who's not been trained in forensic mental health and the family law arena, they're not going to be able to provide the adequate services to meet the needs of that child. It is a very specific niche. So that could be one reason. The other, though, is that, you mentioned that you were kind of disconnected. We see in kids, especially adolescents, then when their parents are going through high conflict and then the divorce process, kids sort of dissociate.
Yeah.
They detach. And that's the brain's way of protecting the child. And so it's a coping mechanism. And so when they sit down with that therapist, they don't want to be there. They're protecting themselves, essentially.
Yeah. What is forensic what is it? Forensic mental health? Is that
so in the mental health world, you have different forensic services. So a forensic service could be criminal law, where
right?
you go and testify for someone on a murder trial or something, and that's extreme. Forensic family law is mental health professionals who work strictly in the family law arena. And there's a set of services that we provide within that arena. So
Got it.
I spend a lot of time, testifying. I spend a lot of time consulting with attorneys. And so it's this small sort of specialization.
Got it. Do we have some people?
We have a couple people with raised hands. Some of them have not told me what they want to ask, but we could just dive in with them and go for it. Just roll the dice and take our chances. So we'll go with Jeffrey first because he was the first person who raised his hand. Let me bring you up here, Jeffrey.
We're eventually going to get some.
Okay.
Hey, Bridget.
Hi.
Hey, I'm Jeffrey Frischner.
Nice to meet you.
I live in Appleton, Wisconsin, and I love two-way. I love the two-way. I discovered it pretty much when you first started. So
cool.
I've been a devotee.
Nice.
Yeah, and I've been actually on the chat and the both the morning meeting and the evening meeting, and So I can teach them etiquette on chat if anybody ever wants some. I love this conversation because I just divorced in January after 36 years of marriage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I fall into that boomer category. And I actually am originally from Queens, New York City, and then lived in San Diego area. I was a Marine stationed in at Camp Pendleton, and met my wife in the 80s and I'm Jewish, and I became a born again Christian. And so we had a very, very wonderful professional Christian life together. I was working on Wall Street and she ran the kids. They all were homeschooled and they all went to Ivy League level schools and are doing incredibly as adults. And so I'm very proud of them. But my kids were the ones who actually suggested that we get divorced.
Interesting.
Yes. Now, I'm going to digress. In 2017, I had because I was on Wall Street, but I've been gambling since I'm a kid. I went into a gambling rehab at a place called Beit Teshuva in Los Angeles and Venice, actually Culver City, right on Venice Boulevard. And I lived there for 6 months. It's a program with UCLA.
All right.
And
sorry, keep going.
Wait, let him. Yeah.
yeah, you're thinking about, do you know Beit Teshuva? Have
No.
you heard
No,
of it?
I was just curious how you're doing. You know how
Oh,
you're
I am doing fabulous. We
good.
are absolutely it was great. I didn't realize I was in a bad situation. It was affecting my mental health. And I perhaps was acting out in other ways. Look, gambling for me, that was my addiction, but addictive behavior since forever. And so now I have been with I'm in therapy. I just love being of service. It's fabulous. That's why I love public discourse, because I drive for Uber. I drive for Uber because I love discourse. And I can tell you, people are very uncomfortable, but they love when you share your story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. We've got a bunch of other people lined up here. So I'm going to bring someone else in. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for sharing
Thanks
that.
for sharing, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Ooh. Okay, I'm going to bring in Carolyn.
Hey, how are you?
Hi.
So, I didn't marry until I was 38. I'm gonna get upset. Your opening, Bridget, got me, so now I'm a little riled up. But I didn't marry for a long time because I didn't want to ever go through a divorce. My parents held on until my father passed away in September, 2 days after their 64th anniversary, and my mother's like still ready to kill him on so many levels, But I held out, and I met this great guy. And I was like, see, career girls can get married, and we had a baby, and then he unexpectedly died. And it was like, it was so soul crushing and very difficult. And I've been alone with my son for many years, didn't remarry, due to I didn't want to go through. I can't turn this into a therapy session. I apologize. That was not my intention to drop that one. But the point is we've been together a long time. I know the drill. I know what it's about. I know the stigmas. I know the kids, they don't want to talk about it. I grew up, I'm a Gen X boomer cusper, grew up with kids divorcing when we were younger, had a lot of that. During the pandemic, I started to see about how parents were getting blocked from bringing their children into grocery stores. And that just sent me into a tizzy. Like, how do you grocery shop, especially if you're alone? So I reached out to the school superintendent, and the guy responded right away. And the next thing you know, there's a group of 25 single parents I didn't know even existed on a call with our supervisor of what do you call that in the schools, for the school psychologist? But it was this incredible experience. So we banded together, we worked together, and we just started a nice group. So when I saw your promo that you wanted to talk about divorce, I was like, oh my gosh, this is just, I need to find your article. I need to like share this with the group, because so here I'm feeling sorry for myself as widowed and blah, blah, the whole thing. But, now we're together with this group of people. And what I learned, and that's what I wrote right here in the chat to say what I wanted to talk about, was just I can't believe what people have to go through in divorces.
Yeah.
And I thought it was bad watching that as kids, as teenagers, whether, growing up here in a small town in New Jersey, a lot of broken homes at the time. And I just feel like the stigma is still there when people do divorce. There's still this weird attachment. But I just want to say that what people go through in divorce is so harsh. And one of the worst questions I think I've ever asked people, but I do it every time, I can't help it, is, are you sure, when they tell me they're getting divorced, and it's, if he died tomorrow, or she, will you be filled with regret? And there goes a local, the train going by. I just feel like I really wish people would just hang on if you can. It is so ugly what goes on and what I've learned, and I'm prattling on. And I know we have other hands up, so I'll let it go. But this is just something that is so in my wheelhouse, and
Thank you for sharing, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
it's been a long time, and
I know, but still, I mean, this is the thing. It's a lot of the people who reached out after that piece, it was single parents, that are obviously doing the best they can. And I truly have no idea. I should almost do an entire episode on single parenting. It deserves its own show, because when I had my child, divorce is separate. It's like a separate topic. It's not always divorce that's causing single parents. There's a million reasons, like you can lose a husband. There's so many things. And as I was researching divorce, this is the thing about divorce. We were like, do we narrow the scope and just have it be kids of divorce, or, you came from divorce, or are you getting divorced? And we decided to go wide. And I still think there's room to do stuff about single parenting, because when I had my daughter, I was like, I don't know how the fuck anybody does this alone. Truly, the true heroes in the world are single parents. It is beyond my comprehension. So I will write that down, and we should do an episode on that.
Yeah, and I just want to say that we do have the Gilmore Girls type relationship up the road from us, and I guess my son, we could ask him questions, but I just want to. All right, I have nothing else to say.
Can I say something? Can I say something?
Yeah, jump in
quickly to you. What struck me about what you just said is this powerful loss that you had actually informs you in terms of being able to try to help people really question if it's the right thing to do, right? It's like you experienced that loss in that particular way. And so when you meet with people who are potentially on the cusp of divorce, you ask them this question that was related to your experience. And that's a really powerful question. And I think someone going through a separation or divorce, they would think about that, right? I mean, in some cases, people are 100% certain. We know that. But I think there would be other cases where people would go, I really need to think about that. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
And by the way, I started asking that way before Heartland, because I was on an episode of Heartland. Just inject that.
Well, it related to your personal.
I did it first before Amy.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, next I mean, unless you and Dr. Stokes have anything you want to cover in between here.
I mean, go for it. Bring the people are waiting.
We've got Monica come.
Let's do it.
She is going to talk about being a single parent.
Yeah, the single parents.
Hello.
They come out in force for this one.
Ouch. I know. Here I am. And I just got back I am not really a single parent any longer because I have one son who just turned 30 and one son who is 28, who will be 29 in September. And I've never do this. So I'm sorry if I'm a little bit nervous, but, and I just got back from camping and I look like shit. I just realized. So anyway, I took a few days off of work, but I was so glad that you were talking about this. And Bridget, I have been following your work with The Spectator when you had your baby, all of that. Oh my God, beautiful writing. But I've been divorced. My kids, I got divorced like 3 years after I got married. So I have been divorced for like 28, 27 years, a long time. I never got married again. I just kind of felt because my parents did stay married. Like I came from a good background. My parents were married, Catholic faith, but my mom was the only one that took us to church on Sundays kind of deal, you know, but that they did make that promise that they were not going to get divorced. They just were not going to do it. And I so took it for granted. And here I was, mid-80s, Gen X, you know, like independent women going to college, but not sure for what, you know, like all of that shit. And I graduated with interdisciplinary studies out of Texas Tech. You know what I mean? Like I was just, it was what it was. But my parents had instilled a lot of confidence in me. And so I went to work and I didn't get married until I was 30. And I may not have even gotten married then, but I got pregnant. And my then boyfriend, we were out of town, boyfriend, girlfriend, like it was weekends and it would be 6 months. And actually we did move to San Antonio before I got pregnant. So we did move in together. And about 3 months later, and I was already seeing the signs, Bridget. And I did what I thought was the best thing. And we got married. My mother it was the saddest day of my life. You know what I mean?
Oh no. Wait, were you pregnant when you got married?
Yes, 3 glorious months. So, and you know what? I really wholeheartedly wanted it to work. And I think that I was hoping my husband did too. It sounded like it, but all that stress. And then 9 months, 13 months, 15 months later, I had baby number 2, Christopher. So, and then at that, it was already over before, you know what I mean? And we tried different, you know, going to a priest who in the end thought that maybe divorce was the best thing. So like, and Episcopalian, like it just didn't work. And long story short, we got divorced and it was about a 10-year battle where pretty harassed. But I made so many mistakes along the way also. Like I now just look back on it, knowing that I wanted my relationship with him to be exactly like my parents. It didn't start out like my parents. It wasn't going to be like my parents. And I wasn't like my mother.
Yeah.
All of that now looking back, I understand how I didn't help it, but he wasn't a good person. So there's that. But here I now have 2 young men. Christopher, who's 28, who I have learned, who is such a risk taker and this and that and boisterous. He always felt he had to be the protector because my older son wasn't when he was at his dad's. And my ex-husband, very emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, the type that would, you're too old for Legos, throw all the Legos away in front of the kids, wouldn't allow them to go see friends on the weekends. It was if I was controlling, holy shit, he was so much more controlling. You know what I mean? So anyway, here we are now, and my sons are kind of admitting a lot of those struggles that I tried to protect them from. So doctor, what do I do now? Because by the grace of God, I have learned how to let go. Truly, I have. I don't feel I can help my boys anymore. So, and I love them with all my heart, but I just don't think I did always a great job as a mom. So I'm not sure I can do a great job now. So any advice?
Well, I think there's a couple parts to this. It sounds like you were really trying to emulate your parents' marital dynamic, right?
Mhm.
And then you end up meeting someone and the relationship doesn't pan out similarly. And then you have this insight and you make this decision that you said ultimately was the best decision to divorce, correct?
I do. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I think that's number one is that because I think we have to reflect. And it's like at the end of the day, looking at your situation in retrospect, if you're confident that you made the best decision to divorce, that's the first part, right?
Mhm.
Because by doing that, you remove yourself from the potential to receive more psychological distress. But also, when we're confident about divorce, we also help to prevent our kids from experiencing more distress, right? And this is in those rare situations. So when your sons come to you and they say, "Mom, that was the right thing to do," is
Yes,
that what they? Okay, well, so
absolutely.
then there's a double confirmation, right? So
Mhm.
you have your own inner confirmation, which is your intuition that says this was the right thing. But then when your sons are saying, "Mom, you did the right thing. I know it was hard, but this actually benefited our lives," I think you have to receive that.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard to receive certain things if we're feeling shame or guilt or questioning our decision making. But I think you have some pretty solid data points to suggest that you did the right thing.
Mhm.
With that being said, though, what do you think is a sticking point for you with all of this? You know, where do you get emotionally, psychologically? Where do you really have struggles with this?
I think I wish they could get past it. I feel like I've gotten past it, and maybe there's a little guilt in that. Like, I feel like I was working through it as an adult all these years. They're just now working through it as an adult. And sometimes I can get a little defensive when they're having a conversation and that, like maybe they're talking about me a little bit. I'm like, well, I was a good mom. You know what I mean? Like, it's so funny how I can get defensive and not really, because we do have a good relationship. One son is more open than I, but they both have a very strained relationship with their dad. So we have a fairly good relationship. But no, I just wish I could get them over the hump.
You
And I feel like I really at their age and where I'm at, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can help as a mommy.
can I say something really quick as
Yeah.
someone who is, and then I think there are other people that we need to get to. That's their problem.
Yeah.
I don't have to be a therapist. Like that's also, it was on me to get over my parents' divorce. At a certain point, you're an adult, you have to take agency. You've got to do the healing for yourself. They need to go into therapy. They need to like figure it out for themselves. And I have decent relationships with my parents. It will be what it's be. There be tense moments? Of course. That's normal even within families that are healthy and good and still together. There's like interpersonal conflict, but in terms of you getting them over it, that is, I like and I understand as a mom, like
Gotta let it go.
you're still always a mom, but
Yeah.
yeah, I would say like they're grown men. Let them
I
figure it
know.
out.
Stop
And
being worse. Yeah, no,
I
But
would
I'm
in
not a
those
therapist.
well, no, you are right. That is a huge part. I would encourage them. I know we have to move on, but I would encourage them to do individual psychotherapy. That anytime if they were to come to you, I would say, "Hey, look, I think you're in a position where you're ready to heal. You coming to me indicates that you're eager to heal. Mom has to continue to do her healing, and I want you to continue to do your healing, right? So you're encouraging them to get the help that they need.
I like that. It's a great way to do it. And yeah, pressure off of me for giving advice that isn't always so great. So, yes,
Thank you for sharing.
thank
Thank,
you, Bridget. Love you so much.
Love you
Yeah.
too.
thank you,
Thank
Monica.
you.
All right. I am.
Do we have other hands?
We do have other hands. I
What?
had a question, but we can
Ask him, Mag.
for
Just
Dr. Stokes. In that situation with Monica, where she got married basically because she got pregnant, is that something you would recommend? Is it better to just establish a healthy relationship separately with the children to start, or what do you do?
So context really matters here, right? So
Yeah.
I would say that if it's two people who share maybe a similar value system, perhaps a religion or something along those lines, I think it's much easier for two individuals to commit to marriage in a situation like that. I think if there's differing value systems, it can be much more challenging. So I think here's the thing: you can have a really healthy, committed relationship as co-parents and not necessarily be married. Right? That's the thing that I think is important to understand. And those are two different things. But let's say you have two people who have a one-night stand and they spend a couple weeks together or a couple months together and they're arguing and they have differing value systems. Getting married may not be the most logical thing to do. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but I think it's also something you don't have to make a decision overnight. So if I were working with patients going through something like that, I would say, hey, let's spend the first year of you guys being the best co-parents possible. Learn about each other, and then let's reassess the marriage piece after that.
Interesting.
One of the reasons that the divorce rates are going down is there's just a lot of people who are living together for years and just not getting married. And they have kids and they're together. They've been together for 7, 8, 9, 10 plus years and raising a child, and they're just not married.
Okay, I'm going to bring up Chris next. Ask you to unmute here.
I have another question too after Chris.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hi. Thank you for having me on. I really enjoy the two-way platform.
Thanks for coming.
All right. Change of pace here. I'm a child of multiple divorces.
Oh.
By my junior year in high school, my mother was on her third divorce. And she also came out as a lesbian around that same time too. So as I get older, this is back in the 90s, and that was still kind of the pull yourself up by your bootstraps, time.
Yeah.
And as I get older now, I've never been married. I've been in relationships and everything, but I've always, the whole idea of the whole family life situation, I wanted nothing to do with it at all. But as I'm getting older now, I'm kind of looking back at well, maybe driving a minivan isn't that bad after all. Things like that. And but then so that's something that kind of now later in life I'm really thinking about, maybe being stubborn and not seeking therapy has caused me to miss out on a lot of what people think is, enjoyable about being in a relationship and having a family.
There's I feel like that our generation in particular, and I still see it, you want to talk about stigma. There's so much stigma around therapy, but and like you said, the pull yourself up from the bootstrap, the younger generations, millennials down, because we live in this over therapeutic language time where everything has become therapy and the language of therapy is second nature to Gen Z. You hear them talking about trauma and everything is it's almost overdone. But your generation, our generation in particular, the men in particular, this was something I learned when I was working with Playboy. They didn't get any of the benefit of that. It was really actually seen as a weakness to even talk about your feelings still with in the space. So I actually appreciate you even sharing that with us, because I think that there are so many men, even just from what I observed at Playboy, that can identify with what you're saying and experiencing. Doctor, any thoughts?
Absolutely. Here's the thing. You being at this point right now is reflective of your own growth. And let me explain. So your narrative of marriage and intimacy was influenced by your parents' divorce and separation and consistency as far as relationships that didn't work. So for you to be at a position at this point in your life where you're questioning that, that's actually indicative of growth, because what that means is you're differentiating. And in family therapy, we have this concept of differentiation. It's where we kind of create our own autonomy and independence apart from our parents' dynamic. So it's good to have some connection to our parents' dynamic, but we also want to be differentiated. And so for you to have this question and to really be contemplating this, I think it really speaks to your desire to have autonomy and create your own intimacy narrative.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. I'm still trying to process it because I understand personal growth. And, when I was younger, I was, you know, you could tell I was the child of divorce when I was younger. I had those bad habits and everything. But as I've grown over the past 10 years, I have a positive outlook, and so I've definitely grown and learned from what I grew up with, and want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah, and you're questioning, and maybe you're seeing the benefit of what a long-term committed relationship could provide for you, because it provides things for us as individuals. So I would encourage you to keep going down this direction.
I will also say, my husband and I always joke that we're very late bloomers, and we met in our 40s, and it's not too late. It's never too late to find love, my friend.
Never too late.
Yeah.
I'm like a knitted pillow right
Become
now.
a healing session.
That's good though. I mean, I think, because I do think we get in our head about this stuff, particularly as we get older, like, oh, I missed the boat. It's too late. It's all this stuff that we tell ourselves that just is not true. It's just not true. If we're willing to open ourselves up and put ourselves out there and take risks and get outside of that comfort zone. And are those records behind you?
It's a lot of records.
Ah, I'm so jealous.
And it's all killer and no filler.
Oh, wow. I'm just really jealous of your record collection right now. Look, some woman would date you just for that record collection.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. I'm going to bring up Ro right now.
Oh.
Hi, Ro.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. All right. Hi, Bridget. Hi, Maggie. Thank you for having me on again.
Thank you.
Always good. I'll provide just a little bit of context for my question for Dr. Stokes, but I'm a child of multiple divorces throughout life. The one that really affected would probably be the one when I was in teenage years in high school, like 16-ish. I feel like I have a similar kind of story to Chris, who we just had up, but and that would be with my stepfather. So that was the marriage that really, when it fell apart, I felt like it really affected. And I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and he was like, wow, you're such a great mediator, this and that. And as Dr. Stokes was talking about the development and the neurology that you develop based on your parents' relationship, I was wondering if he had any type of statistics or trends that kind of have to do with the children of divorce, specifically like if their types of personalities or their coping mechanisms, or even if you know what careers they've kind of sought out and how that might have affected them from his experience.
Great question, but I'm going to ask you a very pointed counter question. You mentioned your stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
How did he affect you emotionally? If you could use one word or one phrase to describe how that affected you, the loss of him being in your life, how did that affect you?
I think I'm trying to find a word for it, but I think at that point, just because there were kids involved versus my real biological father, that happened all very young. But with it being in the in the nuclear family, so to speak, and there's more kids, I felt that it had. I mean, it really does feel like a fallout, and I can't even tell you the exact date when that kind of all happened, like when he left the house, per se. I just have the time frame, and I think that was the kind of traumatic part. I guess if we're looking for the word.
Traumatic with a theme of maybe abandonment with the men in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we experience repeated abandonment, what that does is that equips us with this defense to not get too close to people intimately, because we don't want to experience the abandonment again. And so my encouragement for you is to do some deep therapeutic work and really understand how the abandonment of all of these men impacted you, especially as the one gentleman that you mentioned, and then ask yourself, how can you safely attempt to enter into relationships where you take steps that are patient to ensure that you feel safe enough to move closer to someone? Because I would say typically people who go through what you go through, and I don't want to put you in a box, but when there's abandonment issues, there's oftentimes there can be a fear about committing because we don't want to be re-abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Does that resonate with you?
Yes, I would say so. Just because I know from the relationships that followed in the household and just in general, it made me almost afraid to get close to people. And as I've gotten older, I'm in my 30s now, and I mentioned it in the chat too earlier how the trends of marriage, the 20-year-olds, young 20-year-olds, marriage is less so versus 30-year-olds, and I think that could have a lot to do with just divorce in general and people not wanting to mess up and to do it right and not fix the mistake almost in a way, and you see a little bit more patience there in the trend. So yeah.
In my follow-up encouragement would be that you can create the pace. So let's say you really want to try to find a committed relationship. You can be completely responsible for the pace. I mean, obviously you want your prospective partner to have some input in that, but if for someone who's experienced a lot of abandonment, they need to take it at their own pace where they're comfortable. So that would be my encouragement.
Thank you.
But if there's a longing there, go for it. Just it's great to have a therapist while you do it.
All right. Thank you, Rao. And I'm going to bring up Max, and then maybe we can end on your final question for
yeah, it's a more just like kind of fun, not fun. Yeah, it's a more fun question.
All right, I'll bring up Max here.
What's up?
Back.
I'm back.
A man in a bunker.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to say my parents, I think they had their 40th anniversary this year. So it's definitely possible to stay together.
My parents just had their 50th.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yep. That's why Maggie's the voice of reason around here.
But I'm also single. So what does that say? I don't know.
Well, too.
We were joking because I was like, how come all the sluts are married?
Because they put out? I don't know.
Yeah, they're willing to take the risk, I guess.
Thank you, Max, for ending us on a positive note.
Okay.
Thanks, Max.
It is possible, I believe. My question is more, it's not political, but I opened saying kind of everybody was triggered by this like Elon Trump mom and dad, this ending of a relationship. And my experience, even doing comedy, I like to take the pulse of what people are feeling. And you could tell people were kind of genuinely upset about this breakup. And I've seen this and joked about it for many years. Like they did it with Obama and Michelle, like mom and dad are back. We need mom and dad. Can you explain what is going on in our culture? I can't imagine that, the greatest generation was referring to the president and his wife as mom and dad. What is your kind of take on this?
I think especially nowadays, we look to the media and we look at relationships in the media and we idealize those relationships. And depending on where you are politically, we don't have to get into that. I know Trump and Musk are highly idealized by a lot of people. And so if you take a relationship dynamic, whatever we want to classify that relationship is, there's a lot. A bromance. Perfect. That's good. There is a lot of idealization around that relationship. And so to see a fracture in that as a consumer of the media with an idealized relationship, to see a fracture is really like, it hurts, it's damaging, it's scary, it makes us anger, it triggers things. And so I think the power that they have and the idealization has a lot of influence over the general public and population, because we don't like seeing people who are idealized fall. You were like Superman. We don't want Superman. We want Superman to, beat the bad guys. And so I think the idea of that is a piece. I think also there's a complexity in their relationship that I think on some level was kind of attractive and elusive. And they had this sort of mutual beneficial relationship in different ways. And so I think people gravitate towards dynamics like that. And to see that deteriorate and relatively quickly, I think jolted people. So I think we're all looking for idealizations of relationships. And so to follow up with that, I would ask each individual to really think, what's a healthy idealization of a relationship? What should a healthy idealized relationship look like? I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just been fascinating to me watching everybody kind of be like, mom and dad are breaking up, and not just about Elon Trump. Like I said, we saw it with Obama and a lot of other politicians and these figures, and it does make me wonder if it's just a lack of that kind of relationship in their own life that people are searching for. It's just fascinating to me because it seems very childlike for adults to have that kind of view of world leaders and the president and the first lady or Elon and Trump.
But it's an image and it's accessible and we're getting inundated with it.
Right.
And I think that's a big piece psychologically. We're really focused on these relationships where we should probably be focused on our own relationships, So that would be my
You're like,
take
Elon
on it.
and Trump are breaking
Yeah.
up while your life
Yeah,
is just in shambles.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been amazing, enlightening, and I really appreciate your time, your wisdom. I would love to have you back. We can talk about, I'm also want to say to the men who exposed themselves and made themselves anybody and everybody, but to the men especially, it's always so refreshing to me to see men be open like that publicly. Yeah, it's good. And I would like to know where everyone can find you, my friend.
Yes, so I can provide a couple websites if we have a moment for that. And I want to say while I'm pulling those up, I thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to be here and speak with everyone. These were some amazing topics and questions. I am going to put my general go ahead, I'm sorry.
All the links to your websites will be in the description of this video as well. So
Right.
if people are looking for it, it's in the description below
on the YouTube page.
on the YouTube page.
So I'm also a consultant, meaning if you are going through some sort of relational dynamic, high conflict divorce, separation, I can't have a therapeutic relationship with you, but I can have a consultative relationship with you. So I do provide those services. Even if it's just a phone call and you're going through a separation and you question what to do, I'm there to provide that service.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So everyone has its own vibe.
Yeah.
This is what I love about this show.
Right. They're all different.
Yep.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you
Stokes.
so much.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks for being here. Thank you to all of our guests as well. Thank you guys for chiming in, showing up, raising your hand, sharing, exposing yourselves, hanging out in the chat. Just being human out there.
All right, let's do our
wrap out. All right. I miss everybody already. I could truly do this all night long. Thank you to our guest, Dr. Jeremiah Stokes. Thank you to those of you who showed up and asked questions, as I mentioned. Thank you to Two Way and their amazing team for making this possible. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Bridget,
for navigating all of this and being the voice of reason. Thank you to Quest for sponsoring this show. Go to questhealth.com and use the discount code RealMay25 and get 20% off your purchase. That's questhealth.com, code RealMay25 for 20% off. And there is a link in the description below. And join us next Wednesday, June 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern. If you're with us in the room, it's the same link every time. Please join us. And you guys, the other thing you can do is suggest topics, things you want us to cover. We want this to be a real America family. I want to feel like you guys can, be a part of this, of building this really cool show that I'm obsessed with. Thank you for getting real with me, guys. I'm Bridget Phetasy. Don't forget to tip your server.